Welcome everybody to the December installment of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. It falls on the first day of December this year. How fun. We do have quorum. We got plenty of folks here. My name is David Fenley. I am the chair of the
Can anybody hear me?
Who's that?
That was Carrie. I think she's having issues with sound.
I did hear you for a second, Carrie, and then it cut off. My name is David Fenley. I am the chair of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll do a roll call with everybody that I see on the line right now. If I miss your name, please let me know. Darrell.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Patty. Claudia.
Yes.
Hey, Diane.
Yes.
Awesome. Patsy.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
Richard.
Sure.
Heidi.
Yes.
Eric.
Here.
Carrie.
Yes, I fixed my sound.
Awesome. Trevor. Cool, I see your finger. And John. That
Yes.
works for me too.
Yes.
I'm not always looking up at the screen, but if I do and I see your thumbs up, I will take that as an affirmative. And myself, I am here too. Did I miss anybody?
This is Jeff Danes. David, this is Jeff Danes. I'm here too.
Gotcha, Jeff.
Thank you. Sorry I had trouble getting in again.
13 people. We got a nice chunk of y'all here today. I'm glad. All right. So let's begin with approval of the agenda. I did want to propose 2 additions to the agenda without objection. I do want to have a brief discussion and then a vote on whether or not we should have a January meeting. I would like to add that to the agenda. I would also like to add a discussion with TAAC members about potentially advocating for reinstating of the driver recognition program, I think is what it's called. Darrell has brought this up a couple times in the past, and I think it warrants a discussion. But does anybody have any objection to me adding those 2 things to the agenda? And it would be after the anniversary discussion.
What time would that be?
We can really fit them in actually anytime. If we have a preference for one of those 2, I know Sam, you said that you might have to leave early, so if
I have to leave early. Can you do them earlier if possible? I'm sorry.
And mine's going to be fairly short if nobody has the actual details, but I can, if Pam or anybody is on from before, and they can we can talk about it, and I can just give you the concept of it, and then we can further talk about it next month or the following month.
So Sam, since you do have to leave early, is there a particular agenda item that you wanted to be present for?
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk, I mean, those both seem good for me to be. If there's going to be voting, I'd like to be present for them. But I guess, I'll go by what everyone has to do.
So, I mean, I'm giving you the option to pick. You have to, you're the only person I know that has to leave. So if you want to do one before the other, you got to tell me now. Otherwise, the meeting's from 12 to 2:30 and we'll just do our business as needed.
Which are the things that you have? That driver recognition, what's the other thing?
Driver recognition, a vote on whether or not we have a January meeting, and we can decide what order we go in along with the anniversary discussion to the potential to celebrate the 30th anniversary of TAAC next year too. So
all right, well, go ahead and you can leave it as it. It's fine.
Okay. If there's one of those that you don't that you're okay with missing, let me know and we'll do that one at the end. All right, perfect. So I don't hear any objections from folks. As to whether or not we put these on the agenda, we can deal with order as we go on. But all right, cool. So with the addition of a January meeting potential and a vote and the discussion on driver recognition, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move, Jeff Danes.
Second.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff.
Thank you, Sam. I'll go through roll call. You can give me a thumbs up or a yes or however you want to affirm or deny this agenda approval. So Darrell,
Hey,
Patty, Claudia, thank you, Patty.
yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Patsy. All right, Sam,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Heidi,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Trevor,
Yes.
John, and Jeff. Cool. I didn't hear anything from Jeff. You might have been
Yeah.
muted.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. All right. So that is unanimous. Let's go on to the approval of November's minutes. Unless anybody has changes, I would entertain a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes.
So
So
moved.
moved. Oh, go ahead.
I guess Darrell moved, and do I take that as a second, Sam?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, Sam.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
All right, same order. Roll call. Darrell,
Aye.
Patty, Claudia,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Patsy, Sam,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Heidi,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Trevor,
Yes.
John, and Jeff.
Yes.
You are muted, John. You can give me a head nod too. I'm okay with that. Perfect. I know it seems tedious, but it's a formality that we have to go through every month. All right, thank you very much. We do have, I think this will be a good discussion. We do have Eric Lind here to talk about potential wording for a disability question to increase the data surrounding folks with disabilities that the Metropolitan Council collects. So I will turn it over to you, Eric, and you can take it away.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of TAAC. I appreciate you granting me the time today. This is an item that we wanted to bring to your attention really for discussion. So I don't have a PowerPoint. There's a document that's supported in the agenda. But mainly I wanted to talk through what the idea we're working on is and what we would like to hear from you about your input on this idea. So at Metro Transit, I work in research and analytics, so we do a lot of things with data. I've appeared before this group before a couple years ago talking about how we use data to prioritize stops for snow clearance, for instance. The other job that I have is working on surveys, so supporting our surveys in terms of everything from small project surveys to the larger kind of system-wide travel behavior surveys and so forth. And one of the things we are doing as we look at these surveys, we want to improve the language around how we ask people to identify themselves. And we want to do that for a couple different reasons. One reason is to make sure that people see themselves in how we're asking them to be identified. And This is something that we've looked at with respect to gender identity, with respect to race, ethnicity. And so what we're asking, one component of what we're asking about today is, can we make sure that when we ask people about their disability status, that we are asking it in a way that people can identify themselves and respond to in the way that makes them feel comfortable and recognized. So that's one aspect. The second aspect of it is of course, to kind of improve the data that we're collecting when it comes to different aspects of identifying as having a disability or not. And what I mean by that is what the text of this document starts with is how we currently ask the question. And so right now we ask people a couple different forms, but generally along the lines of, do you have a disability? Yes, no, prefer not to answer. And this has been language that's been used in many different surveys across the council, is used in our opinion surveys when we ask people about their experiences. It's asked about travel behavior surveys. And I do understand that in previous conversations, maybe with Jonathan Ehrlich, my colleague in MTS in Met Council, that was identified as one of the better ways to ask this question by this group. So do you have a disability? Yes, no, prefer not to answer. When we look at our ridership on Metro Transit and thinking about our ridership as a whole in the region with all of our different services, we know that there are other dimensions to this, and some of those become really important as we try to gather information. So for instance, as we go out and survey our customers about their perspectives on bus service and the locations of stops, or even the number of stops, we do ask riders, would you prefer to have, let's say, more stops in this area so the bus is stopping more frequently, or would you prefer to travel more quickly but maybe have to take a little bit longer to get to a stop? So it's a very common trade-off that happens in fixed route, transit planning. You can have more stops, or you can have kind of faster speed. And so we're asking people about these questions. Well, it would be nice to know when we're asking these questions and we have preferences stated by, some number of people. Are they people who say they have a disability? If they do say they have a disability, are they people who have trouble with, mobility, people who have a reason why they would not prefer to walk farther? Or is it something else, right? So is it a vision impairment, which isn't strictly, related to mobility? Are there other disabilities? So when we start to look at the information that we can get from customers and from riders, I think what we're interested in is, how do we ask that question in a fair way that will also let us get additional information about how people experience our system. And so in the so I've been working with Guthrie Baird and with Doug Cook and other members of our internal working group on this. We drafted some example language of how this might be applied. And really what I'd like to hear from this group is feedback on, do you think this is worth doing to kind of expand out the identity of disability? If so, are there particular ways to ask a question that seem more appropriate or would be more welcome? And then, if there's other things where it seems like it's not either worth asking or appropriate to ask, then we definitely want to hear that as well. And as I'll stop talking in a minute and look forward to hearing from you, the last bit I'll add is, one of the things that we're working on is kind of standardizing this across all of our survey efforts. There are many different times that we go out and ask people about their opinions and experiences and preferences. We'd like to be able to standardize that so we always are asking it the same way. We can compare across surveys, but also that people know kind of what they're going to get when they're looking at a Metro Transit or a Met Council survey. So those are the main purposes. I don't know if you could share that document again. Otherwise, I might be able to. Oh, thank you, Jason. Could you zoom in a little bit, or maybe a lot? And we'll look at that example question. Scroll to that. Okay, so the main discussion point is here. My question to you all, members of this committee, would you like to see a question that says, do you have a disability? Yes, no, prefer not to answer? Or would you be okay with some form of this question? How do you describe your disability or ability status? And this would be a select all that apply question. So certainly not asking people to rank them or identify one over the other, but any that apply could be selected. And the responses would be vision impairment, a hearing impairment, a learning disability, for instance, ADHD, dyslexia, a developmental disability, a mobility impairment, a mental health disability, a temporary impairment due to illness or injury, such as broken leg or surgery, broken ankle, or disability not listed above. And then I think the last choice is I do not identify as having disability or impairment. So maybe I'll just stop there and ask if there are responses or opinions on the approach of, disability on its own without further detail versus this kind of split out approach.
This is David. I see a few hands already. I'm sure we're going to have a robust discussion about this. I want to ask another question though, a why question before we maybe get into some wordsmithing here, because I have a feeling folks will want to do that as well. But I'd like to kind of look at the big picture before we get down into the details. And this question could be for Eric, for any of the TAAC members, or essentially anybody on this call. I definitely want to query the hive mind here. So you did give one reason as to why, and it was a good reason as to why getting a little more granular data as to what the disability may be. But I'm curious if there are other reasons that you were thinking. I'll give you a stab first, Eric, but then I'm willing to hear from anybody else as to the why, because I think that's a good question to really get into before you start to ask survey questions that might not actually give you what you want or really anything at all.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yes, the why I think is twofold. It's one, a little bit more connection to how experiences relate to disability when it comes to our fixed route service. And another example is we're piloting, as I'm sure you know, these apps on the mobile phone that can help low vision and blind riders navigate our transfer system. So understanding when those customers are surveyed in the general population of rider experience and have opinions about transfer, ease of transfer or wayfinding and so forth. We would like to identify if those customers who maybe are giving us very low scores are those who have a vision impairment. So that's one, there's that functional reason. Again, the other reason, and maybe Guthrie could speak to this as well, but the other reason is the sort of identity reason. So capturing people's own self-identity in how we ask these questions. And so part of that motivation may resonate with you all, and it may not. As we've looked at, again, these other dimensions of identity in our survey process, we have found that people really want to be able to identify themselves properly in these survey documents and not be felt like they're not being captured. So it's really more of the end user of the survey feeling recognized. And so that's why it's important to hear from you all about whether this would accomplish that or whether we're kind of off on a fool's errand.
Chair, if I could,
Oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I think Guthrie was going to comment. He threw it to Guthrie. But the thing that I see here is on this list of identification, you're not identifying anybody on the autism spectrum or on the neurodivergent spectrum. So really, and if you start to identify folks at this very narrow scale, what's to stop you from developing programs specifically targeted to those populations without making it an equitable system for all of us and not just targeting particular disabilities or situations?
This is David. I'm pretty sure I can be corrected though. I'm pretty sure that autism falls under developmental disability, whether we like that or not.
It does not. It's
Okay.
not.
Okay.
I mean, as far on a legal standpoint, but people don't identify themselves on the spectrum as that. So that's what we're saying. If you're wanting people to self-identify, then we need to include folks on the spectrum and how they identify.
Jasmine,
Yes, go ahead, Sam.
would that I believe he had an other choice on there, and knowing that you can't list every disability, not meaning to, make anyone less important, but would that not be an acceptable thing? And then I had another comment after. But I was waiting for Darrell's answer, I guess, for that.
I mean, it certainly would be acceptable, but I don't want to be lumped in other a lot of times. So if people are on the autism spectrum, they also would not want to be lumped in other.
Well, then I guess my question would be, if you chose other, would there be an ability to type in what your disability was, number one?
That would be,
And,
yeah.
And to me, that would, in my opinion, that would be an acceptable thing, just
Yes.
because visually impaired, that doesn't mean that I'm visually impaired. It may be that I'm blind, and, there's a whole lot of spectrum of visual impairment.
Right.
And then I guess the other thought is that I don't think that it's bad for you to ask about disabilities. And sometimes I've been one to not like that, but in this particular case, if you're actually going to use it for helping choose, where you stop and how safe it is, I think that's a respectable thing. I had a stop, I will give you an example, in Plymouth on my express bus route that was, I felt, an okay stop in the spring and summer, for one exception, except in the winter. Every time, because there was no sidewalk there, he'd let me in a nice deep snowbank met by a pine tree, which was not really, thrilling. So I think that there is something to be said for knowing what could be helpful for somebody and safe and good stops.
Thank you, Sam, for bringing us back to the why. And I do, before we get into wordsmithing, I do want to just give folks the opportunity, both members and staff and other folks here, to address the overarching why question. I mean, it seems to me like the why is there, but I would like to provide Eric and the Met Council with even more reasons as to why, so then they can use that data better. I mean, obviously we will talk about this again, but I want to get at that. I see Trevor and Patsy's hand up. Trevor, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments, but since the second one is wordsmithing, so I will save that for later. But the first one is kind of addressing why. I do think it's really important to ask about disability, especially when it comes to transportation. And I think just asking, do you have a disability or do you identify as someone with a disability is too broad and not helpful for data collection purposes, because the experience of people with disability varies based on the disability that you have. And so I do think it's important that if you are going to ask the question and you're trying to get information about disability, to break it down, like in that first question you had, breaking it down into different disabilities, because then that information is actually useful. Because then you can say how many deaf and hard of hearing, riders do we have? How many wheelchair users do we have? Because they're all going to have different needs. Deaf and hard of hearing are going to want more visual things on public transit. People who are blind or low vision are going to want more hearing and tactile accommodations, stuff like that. And so by breaking it down, and you'll actually have a lot more useful information than just simply asking if you have a disability.
Patsy, and then Heidi. And so am I. You're muted, Patsy, and so was I trying to tell you that you were muted.
How's that? Now do you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty, good. Okay. I was just saying that, yes, I believe that being in more of a detailed situation, you're questioning and giving different choices is going to be very necessary, because a black and white question of do you, yes or no, can leave a lot to be desired as to whether somebody connects that word disability, because it can come across as being, well, I shouldn't really say negative, but I'm also looking at this in terms of how a lot of you know I'm on the Traumatic Brain Injury Advisory Committee, and we are trying at this point changing some of the questions that are on some of the evaluation. And that was one of them. Exactly what we're doing is getting it from being just a black and white yes or no to being more detailed. So I would say stick with what we have right here, especially as my support staff that's here with me even commented that her sister, who she is currently working with, who had a stroke, falls into 5 of those different categories. So if she was to say yes, like Trevor said, do you know, is it that she's visually impaired? Is it hearing? Or what is it? So I would go right along with sticking with it as it is.
Thank you, Patsy. Heidi, and then Andy.
My concern is because I have multiple disabilities, so when practically that list fits me. But at the same time, I've seen where we get pigeonholed, like the blind people get more certain things, or the wheelchair people. So we need to figure out how we can spread this across the board. So people like who have multiple disabilities, like I have walking, hearing, eyesight, learning, developmental, emotional. So I have everything. So how does a montage people that don't 100% fit your way of thinking at the same time they don't, it's a hard question to answer or say to you guys, but I wanted to look at it because I gone to a bunch of different things over the years for disability things, and people like us who have multiple disability get pigeoned into a disability way of thinking that doesn't always work. So how do I get like a variety package? So I can be happy, and that person who's only blind gets what they need, or the person in that wheelchair gets what they need, but I can get that variety package and still be able to use the bus and still be able to call Metro Transit or use Metro Mobility or use the different stops and, just like anybody else. So just something to think about, because I'm one that doesn't fit the norm. And just so you know, human services doesn't always know how to work with people like us who come born with multiple disabilities and throw a giant wrench into the system of understanding what's best for us. I'm still trying to figure that out. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you. Oh, and the other thing is I do like having where you can write in something and in other, or like Sam was talking about, because I think that's a great idea, because then you might hit something that you never even thought about. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. I think that was a fantastic point. I see that Andy put his hand down. I would also, to build on your point, Heidi, maybe Eric, if there could be, if you click other and then type something in, have that field be open again so you can put more than one other in. Does that make sense? So there could be 3 others that you type in there. So it's not to only allow a person one option to type in for other. I will go to Guthrie and then Patty.
Thanks. Sorry, I did not mean to lower my hand other than just you had already called on me. So I'll wait, but I'm still waiting.
No, we'll let Andy go first. You've had your hand up for a while, and then we'll come back to Guthrie and Patty, okay? Go ahead, Andy.
I just wanted to call out in terms of the why. Be really careful if you're only presenting things as preference with regard to the different choice you used as the primary example between additional stops versus quicker service. Because for some folks that's not actually going to be a question of preference at all. If I can gut out managing to walk 2 city blocks, but a third city block is going to prevent me from being able to utilize fixed route and push me onto para service because fixed route became less accessible. It's not really a preference in so much as it is making a choice to exclude somebody. So I think just making sure that if you are having that question couched in preference language, that you maybe have a follow-up that says something like, would either of these options prevent you from being able to access the fixed route system or something like that?
Thank you, Andy. I think that's a good point. And so I would ask Eric, is there going to be context provided when this survey is sent out? Like, this is why you should answer this question because this and this might happen. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, and I think that's what Andy was addressing. I don't think he was being as editorial as I am and having an opinion, but or is it just going to be the survey without saying this is why we're asking these questions?
So, Mr. Chair, one of the things we're doing in general is trying to improve the survey practice in a number of different ways. One of them is being clear why we're collecting any information in the survey, being able to connect it to decisions, which is something that I've heard multiple times this afternoon. Don't ask something because unless you have a way that you're going to use the answer. Okay, so it may be that when we are asking these questions about different dimensions of service, it may not be directly connected to any one place. If it is, we certainly should be saying, this is going to inform our decision about the maintenance or expansion of this line or closure of this stop, whatever it might be. And then the closing the loop part is that we report back to the community, people that took the survey, what the results were and what our actions are going to be. So that full kind of, here's why we're asking it. This is how it connects to the decision. Here's the decision that we made and some of the reasons why, and the survey was an input into that. So that's the ideal. We would like to follow that practice. With respect to this question, there is also this bracketed part in the question itself, which I think envisioned as sort of a pop-up or a note or an explanation for people. Why are you asking this? We're interested in this identification, regardless of whether you identify as being disabled. Your answers help Metro Transit make its services more inclusive, and that's true in terms of whatever the survey might particularly be about. But I do take the point, and Andy, thank you for making that about the difference between preference and, you know, exclusion based on one end of that choice set or not.
Thank you, Eric. Now, Guthrie, it's your chance to.
Well, thank you, Chair and committee members. I guess just first thing, Jason, if you don't mind just making the text a bit smaller so you can see the full range of choices. There's also a follow-up question to it that asks individuals to share their specific disability or ability status. So this would be available for anybody, regardless of how they answered. So if it is in the disability not listed here, or you want to specify that you aren't blind but you might have low vision, that kind of information, the more detailed information, is going to be really important. And I just echo what Eric had said about the two-pronged approach, that we want to be more meaningful and have more data tied to some of our efforts like IRA and the TAAC subgroups around accessible transit information and marketing materials and the priority seating campaign, but also want to just ensure that people feel more represented when completing surveys like this.
Thank you, Guthrie. That was very helpful. Patty.
I'm really glad to see this these questions. I would put reinforcing some of what Heidi says. I would put in a strong vote for saying multiple disabilities, because I can respond to that and answer multiple. Well, actually, no. But by multiple disabilities present different transit needs, plus the multiple disabilities that I have present different needs than Heidi has. And I think it's very easy. It's necessary in some ways that we have to isolate things so we can focus on, focus money, focus employee time on meeting different disabilities. But it's also important that people know, in terms of feeling represented, I would say that somebody recognizing that my disabilities are cerebral palsy and essential tremors. Those are the two most relevant. They present different problems and different problems on different days. And that distinction, I think, is both important for staff, everybody working to provide services. I'm not doubting anybody's, not intentions, but attitude, approach, whatever. But it's important for both the people that are providing the services and the people that are needing metro mobility, metro transit issues. So we need to do more of that.
Thank you, Patty. I'll go Richard, then Ken, then Eric, and also a reminder, if you've already spoken or changed your desire to speak status, please put your hand down, just because I have a lot of hands up and I want to make sure that I get to everybody and don't mistake you for needing to comment when you don't. So Richard, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. The bracketed part of the question one, we're interested in this identification regardless of whether you identify as being disabled. Who are you expecting to that bracketed part to be, to identify with that part of the bracketed question?
I think Richard,
Sure.
that's actually a really good question.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
Chair, committee members, Guthrie, Bayard, Council, ADA, and Title VI Administrator. I think one example might be here that, why we're using also ability status is that we, and part of the representation piece is that we want to be mindful of those who might not identify as having a disability, but interact with transit services, maybe in unique ways to them. And so, for example, there could be somebody who's capital letter D deaf who uses ASL and doesn't identify as necessarily having a disability. They just use a different language. And so we want to make sure that if that's something that applies to them, they don't identify as being disabled, but they should still have the ability to share how they interact with transit services and what they use to interact with transit services. And that information is nonetheless going to be very beneficial to us.
Okay, just one quick follow-up to that. So we also, in addition to the disability community, that we also represent the interests of the senior population on this committee. And I'm thinking some of the senior population may not necessarily pick these items, but for instance, the example you gave of the distance between stops is something that's very important to seniors who might be more frail or are hard of hearing. So I'm just raising that issue to, make sure that you make this broad enough to include that part of the community, or maybe have a different survey that reaches that part of the community. Many of them would consider themselves disabled and use mobility devices and that sort of thing, but I think some of the community may not identify with these questions exactly.
Richard, that's a fantastic point, and I really think that's why the bracketed portion is in there, is to try to get at the folks who don't identify as having a disability but would qualify under the ADA as having a disability. I mean, we are at an unfortunate point in society where having a disability is viewed as negative or undesirable. So people who do clearly have disabilities say they don't have disabilities. And I think that's part of what's getting at this too. The elderly are folks who do fall into that category, Richard, and that's why we're really glad to have you here. But if there is a better way to try to tease out those folks who might not identify as having a disability but do have limitations that could be addressed through the Met Council, knowing that their riders have whatever a limitation or impairment. I know these are not words that we like to use, but they're words that are in the ADA and they have legal meanings behind them, which is the only reason why I use the words. But that's a really good point, Richard. Thank you for that. Ken.
Am I unmuted?
You are, but it is very quiet.
Okay. I'll talk loud. I just have a quick comment about the text that you guys are referring to in brackets, and I joined late, so if you addressed this already, my apologies, but I want to make a comment related to screen reader users and how we might access a pop-up or information that is incidental to a question that appears not in a normal way. I would strongly urge that pop-ups not be used. They're notoriously very difficult for a screen reader. Sometimes the pop-up can open and the screen reader can read it, and then the screen reader cannot close it and get back to where they were before. That's very frustrating. Sometimes there's an issue with the pop-up, especially if someone's a Braille reader and reading from their Braille output. There's oftentimes confusion when pop-ups come into the issue. So I would urge that you try to figure out a way to incorporate the text in the normal way that you're incorporating the rest of the text to avoid that kind of confusion for screen readers.
Thank you very much, Ken. Eric.
Mr. Chair, I just have, it's really just a question. One of the whys is to make feel heard or represented when filling out the survey. So I was just curious if you were receiving feedback from survey respondents with disabilities that they didn't feel represented by the survey. Is that brought to your attention, or was that something survey respondents?
It's tough to hear you, Eric. You're kind of going in and out.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'll try again.
Perfect. That's much
Right there,
better.
okay. I was just curious. One of the whys for getting to this granular level is to make respondents feel seen or heard or a part of the survey. So, was there actual feedback from survey respondents of the disability community that they didn't feel heard or represented by these surveys? I guess that would be a question for Eric, I'm assuming.
Yes, Mr. Chair, committee members, not in this dimension of identity, but in both thinking about how we talk about gender, how we talk about race, ethnicity. We have heard feedback over time from people, and that has led us to rethink and revisit our wording and our choices. And I think and Guthrie might have heard something more direct, but I think our approach here was to consider this dimension of identity in the same way and just try to get it right. So I haven't heard any specific feedback, no.
Because if that was a true concern from respondents, I understand that and need to get line by line or more granular. Because I don't know if I'm getting off track here, but the fear of getting this kind of data from the first why would be you have a survey about maintenance or improvements to maybe a particular fixed route stop or something or the other. And a majority of the people who identify having a disability select A. So then the fear is you focus only on improvements for that sector of the disability community when it's the responsibility of Metro to make it accessible for all and not put more eggs in one basket when looking at it. So that's just more of a caveat on how the data is used, I guess. That would be my only comment.
Mr. Chair, just one quick comment on that.
Go ahead.
Because that is very important. And I know there's the trade-off with identifying these different categories is you might say, well, the biggest category is going to end up being the one that gets the most attention or whatever it might be. But I also heard in multiple comments about how when these disabilities interact and there's this obviously uniqueness to how people experience the system. I think actually having information about that, about how often that happens, is going to be really helpful for our agency, because I think a lot of times the way we think about it right now is kind of this yes, no disability question. People who say yes, in transit, we're like, oh, it must be a wheelchair user, right? We have a really incomplete understanding inside the agency of the dimensions of ability that impact people's experience. So in that way, I think it would help not concentrate, but sort of broaden our thinking around how we have to use the universal design to let everyone use the system. Because it's not just like, is there a concrete pad, right? So that's my reaction to that. It's a really good point to be wary of, but I think the benefit outweighs that risk, in my opinion.
I see Patsy and Pat T's hands still up. I will go to, I don't see any other hands up. I wanted to give everybody a chance to chat before we did seconds here. But Patsy, take it away.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I had a couple things, and hopefully with my brain, I'll remember exactly. One, I know people have been commenting about numerous things, that they fall into a couple different categories. That's, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where we have that select all that apply. So for anybody that was concerned that they fall under 2, 3, 4 different categories, so to speak there. And the H, or not H, which one was it? There's one of them there that you could actually be able to fill in if something does not get listed up there, because otherwise we're going to end up with, 20, 25 different choices if we list every possible reason for being considered disability.
Oh, it would be hundreds, Patsy, not 15.
I was trying to be nice about it. I didn't want to be too pushy about it, but so thank you for stepping in and answering that for me. Okay. It would be pages long. And I can speak especially for myself in that with my traumatic brain injury, a lot of people are going to look at me. In fact, it has happened on Metro Mobility, whether that's the drivers or whether that's the riders that will say to me, you're disabled? Well, it's because, as a lot of our group know, head injury is an unseen disability. So a lot of those things that are listed are disabilities that we all deal with in our own way, but still they need to be taken into consideration. And I agree with a couple of the people that if you guys are looking at taking down information for data, so you know what people have and how many riders are dealing with wheelchairs versus people with vision versus people with, whatever, we need to be able to break it down. And I believe that is great what you have. Oh gosh, there was another thought, but I know one thing. People had commented about autism, and I did put it on the chat. I did look at it, and actually autism is considered a developmental disability. If anybody was curious, I put it on the chat and I even put the web address.
Yes.
The other thing I can't remember, so go for it.
Legally, yes, that is true, but Darrell's point was spot on. The folks, autistic folks, consider themselves, a unique group, not necessarily part of the DD folks.
But doesn't that happen with a lot of us, though? I mean, let's say with myself, I don't know, my brain injury, that's not a disability, or that's not whatever. Don't we all want to try to say that ours is in a separate?
Yes. I mean, it's an unfortunate nature of bureaucracy is they want to categorize folks. I mean, we're definitely not gonna solve that right now, and
No.
I think we would be wasting our time if we did it right now. I do want to get into a little bit of the wordsmithing, not too wildly, but before we do that, I want to read Trevor's comments because I know that not everybody has access to the comments, because I think he pretty much sums up a lot of my concerns with the words used, and probably a lot of yours as well. So Trevor wrote, for words describing disabilities, I would move away from the word impairment, use deaf or hard of hearing, blind or low vision, mobility disability, and temporary disability. I would also add neurodivergent, including autism and ADHD. So I think that gets at the language that the disability community likes to use for itself. I do know that the words that were used in the survey originally, Eric and Guthrie, they're taken right out of the ADA. Impairment is that is the definition of disability, is one or more things that impair your life. So I do understand that's why you put that in there. I see, I'll go to, and again, opening it up to a little bit of wordsmithing if you all want to. I will open it up to Patty and then Heidi.
I think I've expressed myself.
You just automatically went on mute again.
No big deal.
All right, I will take that as move on to Heidi. Okay, Heidi, go ahead.
My question is, how many years can you get out of it? Because I don't know if the next generation, we got a good group right now that can answer some of these questions. But how about the kids who are coming out of high school that have disabilities? I mean, are we even talking about when they, where they're going to live and what they're going to do? And if they're taking the city bus or Metro Mobility or any kind of transportation, do they even understand that there's a world out there where they ask these kind of questions and stuff? Are we teaching this in high school and junior? I think we should start in grade school all the way up to college. But are we talking about this in a way that the next generation, so we can keep improving in whatever? There's never going to be a perfect answer to this question that we're bringing up today, which I'm glad we are. It's just that I don't know if the next generation, because we already are seeing it with all the different things that just recently happened in history, and we got the virus and we got the riots and we got this and that. So how about in the disability community? Are we talking about this so we can keep on having like TAAC meetings and transportation approvals? So it's something to think about when you put this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. As usual, you're very forward thinking and kind of looking at the big picture, which unfortunately this survey will not be able to address. but you are spot on. I agree with what you
But
said.
it needs to be talked about so these kinds of surveys can keep going forward and keep getting better in ways that really get to the point of what we're here today talking about.
Yes, I totally agree, Heidi. I was paying you a compliment because I think you are spot on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think so. So Guthrie expressed interest in getting at the third question here. I do see your hand, Diane. And I see John as well. John, you look enthusiastic to say something, so I will go to John, and then maybe let's dig in on the third question. And you're muted.
I'm wanting to get back to Richard's really good point about aging, and people are aging not identifying themselves as having a disability. I'm wondering if one were to use the wordage disability / areas of functioning which present barriers or something like that. So that, I mean, that's a way of sort of easing into the subject without having to fully make the leap of identifying as having a disability.
Thank you, John. Diane, and then we'll dig into the third. Actually, before Diana can do, I know that we're over, Eric, and you were scheduled to go only until 1:15. If you can stick around longer, great. Otherwise, please let us know. I know that you said you can stick around longer. Okay, perfect.
I'm happy to, Mr. Chair.
We're stuck here till 2:30, but you don't have to be stuck here till 2:30. I'm sorry, not stuck. We are happily placed here till 2:30. Diane, take it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to, I like Trevor's suggestions, and circling back to what Richard talked about, I'd like to see the addition of something that gets to the difficulty walking long distances, because that may not be related to mobility, it may not be related to anything else, but it is definitely something that many older people who are frail, but we don't want to use that word, experience in terms of why they can't access transit stops.
Right. Maybe share the screen again and let's dig into that third question. And I know we're over. I think we should be okay with the 3 remaining agenda items here. But I think this is important.
Mr. Chair, I'll just introduce this as our way of kind of sharpening the understanding that flows from the first question. So, of course, people can identify different disability dimensions. We wanted to specifically know how those might impact particular aspects of our service and just transportation in general. So can you scroll down, please, to that question 3? I guess follow up to question 3. Follow up to, so which of the following mobility devices or assistive technologies do you use to help you navigate transit services? So again, this would be a select all that apply. The choices that we have, and this is not an exhaustive list, and if there are commonly used ones that should be included, please let me know. But we're most interested, in kind of getting the most commonly used technologies or devices. So wheelchair or other wheeled mobility device, walker, cane, or other mobility device. And I guess the difference between A and B was largely about the wheeled nature of it. C, mobile phone app, IRA, we've talked about other apps, Google Maps, and then an open-ended other. So I'm sure this is a very incomplete list. This is our first cut at it. I'd be interested to hear your perspectives on what should be included.
This is Heidi. Can
Go
I
ahead,
say
Heidi.
something?
Yep, go ahead,
Yeah.
Heidi.
The first thing when you read it, Metro Mobility has a hard time with this, and everyone else calls it, and I don't even say the name anymore, but mine's not a cane, it's a crutch. So if you're talking disabilities, there are two different kinds. There's people who use canes and people who use crutches. And it's just call it that, because there's so many different names for our different kinds of crutches that we use, that I just call it that, because that's what Metro Mobility calls it. When I have to call and going, oh, can you use the stairs? Can you use the lift? So be really careful, and when you put this together, and because I don't want to be pigeonholed in a way that I can't get out of it. At the same time, I'm telling you the truth, of what's really going on. So just look at all your options before you put this out there in a way that can fit multiple people. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. I see Andy's, I think I saw your hand up, Andy. Yes, I did. And we also had a couple. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I just added a couple of suggestions to the chat about making sure to add white cane and service animal to the list. And then just to piggyback back super briefly, I think I put some language in the chat that might just be another multiple choice option that would address age-related reluctance to identify as a person with a disability. So you might want to check out that language about adding that in as an option to select.
Fantastic additions, Andy. Let me see, scroll through hands. I don't see hands. Would anybody else like to chime in here? Do we need to add things to this list? Do we need to take things away?
Excuse me, Chair. What was it that Andy just said at the very end? I missed out very last sentence or two.
Yeah. So he wanted he had a suggestion for addressing Richard's concern about aging folks who might not consider themselves as having a disability. He had some language regarding that, specifically, and you put in the chat, age-related condition that impacts sensory or mobility function. And then he has examples here: macular degeneration, hearing loss, or arthritis. Just some good words to get at the age-related disability that you may have but not identify as having. Any other questions, comments? I don't see hands up. People, folks, feel free.
I
Anybody,
have a question,
go ahead.
David.
Yeah.
My question is, do we have to be like politically, I don't know if I'm saying it right, correct with our language? You know how, you know, well, in the disability community, this is how we say it, but in the real world, you know, or like the ADA's standard or doctor standards, do we have to use, what language do we have to use to make our points across? And then how do we teach it to the people who don't know all this fancy stuff? You know, their lessons so they get the real answer to their questions. You know, like, because the Met Council or Transit wants this information, but I have to be able to understand it in order to answer the question, because sometimes it might be written in a way I never even understood. So how do we deal with that? Or is there teaching? Is there, or do I have to do all the work to understand it? I mean, where does it fall under? Just
It's
wanted
a
to bring that up.
it's a fantastic point, Heidi. Trevor's feedback, I think, really got at that. I'm a big proponent of moving away from the medical model, and having people identified as conditions or impairments or disorders. I'm not a big fan of that personally. That's where we are legally, unfortunately. But again, I think this is very much related to your previous comment too, where this is the direction where things are going, where folks with disabilities are really taking charge with their identity, and how other people view and talk about them. So maybe this could be a way to somehow be part of that evolution away from that medical model into, you know, a more identity focused or social model view of disability. Um, but it's not easy, you know, that doesn't happen all, you know, in one day. It takes decades and decades for language and people's minds to evolve. But again, much bigger picture outside of the scope of the work we're doing here today. I will stop pontificating. All right. Does anybody have any comments for Eric Lind before we move on? Folks can also feel free, if they want to really dig into this and wordsmith it and send recommendations. You can do it via email. Everybody should have this in their TAAC packet that got sent out exactly a week ago on Wednesday before the holiday last week. So feel free to dive in with your in your personal time if you want, and send it off to us. If there are no other comments, which I don't see, I would like to thank Eric. I think this was a robust discussion. I'm not surprised it went over, and I'm very happy that it did. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thank you for coming.
All right.
Thank you.
Sam, last chance to pick what we do last on the agenda. Otherwise, I'm just going to start with what we have here, and that's the TAAC Anniversary. You know what? Let's do the January meeting first. I think that's probably the most important, most immediate thing that we should all be participating in the discussion. So we had this discussion. We had this discussion for the July meeting as well. Traditionally, we cancel the January meeting because it tends to fall right on or right after the first of the year. That is a holiday. People are out of town. People are hungover. People are none of us, of course.
That was what I was going to say, Chair. That none of us drink here excessively, right?
Yes. people, yeah, people, you know, do different things on holidays. This year, it actually falls pretty late, so it falls on the 5th of January. I mean, we always have lots of work to do, but I will not express my opinion either way, but I do want to leave it open to the group to decide if or if not we have a January meeting. If it falled on the 1st or 2nd, I would not be having this discussion. I would just say we should cancel it, but it falls on the 5th, so I want to make sure that, you know, as experts in your own field. You know, you do this work. We like to do this work. I want to at least give you the chance to continue to do this work in the month of January.
Chair, as you alluded to, this is the vice chair. I will be sober by January 5th. So I would recommend that we continue on with the good work that we're doing, because we actually got a good momentum going, and I think we do have enough work to do on our yearly schedule to continue our meeting in January.
I agree with Darrell. By that time, my head should be straightened out and thinking straight. My eyes should be working well, so shouldn't be a problem.
I do know that as you know, momentum begins to go in one direction to make a decision one way or the other, you tend to have momentum to do something. I do want to give the option, and maybe I'll play a little bit of, you know, the opposite role here about why we should not have a January meeting, because I do want to make sure that voices of folks who do not want to have a January meeting are heard. You know, it is early in the year. People might be out of town. I want to make sure, and it has been I don't think I've been on TAAC, and I've been on TAAC for about 6 or 7 years, where we had a January meeting. So I don't want to throw out tradition.
Right.
If folks were expecting.
You're right, Chair. That is true and correct. But generally, we do have we do know that ahead of time that is not a cancellation. Generally, we do cancel one meeting out of 12, even sometimes 2, but hardly ever do we have a January meeting. So you're right. History and precedence says that we do not have a January meeting, but I think because we have the momentum going, I think we can always address what our yearly calendar looks like, and maybe we can just tell a couple jokes and kind of have a light January meeting.
Sam Jasmine,
Go ahead, Sam.
I'm voting to not because I may be out of town, but don't know quite yet.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any, I want to give the floor to folks who prefer not to, or you can say you don't have a preference, but you will not be able to attend if we do, because we'll be out of town. And if 6 of you say you're not going to be able to attend, you know, we're already looking into a potential quorum issue.
Yeah.
So I do want to.
Just so you know, I fell off and now I'm back on, and I caught the tail end of it. So I get what you're talking about.
So do you not want to have a January meeting, or do you want to have a January meeting, Heidi?
Whatever you guys decide, because I'm always here, you know. So I don't travel, so and I don't go very many places because I have to rely on Metro Mobility. So I'm always coming back home early, or I have to rely on transit. So I'll be there if you want me. If you don't, that's okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Let me pose the question a different way. If we have a January meeting, is there a possibility that you will not be there? I have a no from Sam. I have a possible no from Trevor. Anybody else?
Also, Chair, I would ask, would we have staff available? Is our lovely staff and our lovely recorder, is Allison going to be available at that time, or is she out of town around the first of the year as well?
You are so thoughtful, Darrell. Thank you very much.
I'm out of town in December, but I'll be back in January.
Okay. So you'll be back by January 5th?
Yeah, I'll be back by January 5th.
Okay.
Realistically, if she wasn't there, and David, if you weren't there, could we still have the meeting? Because don't we have to have certain people running the show in order to make sure that it's all legal and correct and done right?
Well, I mean, we can make it work. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have a vice chair too. Darrell's been able to fill in as chair when I haven't been able to attend. And
But
I
is there
think
fill-in for the
amazing.
note taker? Because we never
And
talked about that. Like if the note taker gets sick and we still have a meeting, do we have a fill-in to, to document it? To have
that
it for
is
legal records?
That's a really good point, Heidi, and it came up in our July discussion, and it was the main reason why we opted to not have a July meeting is because Allison was not going to be around, and I think I need to revisit offline. I need to revisit maybe a little bit of redundancy or a backup in terms of staff liaison for this meeting. If Allison, who I think you said Allison, like you've have only taken like one sick day in 20 years, which I found
Yes.
Yeah,
ridiculously amazing.
yeah,
Never
but
missed a day that I know of.
Like,
yeah, but I can get somebody to record the meeting for me, and then I will type up the minutes.
Thank you.
okay, so it seems like the lack of chiming in here, we're sort of okay with, but not excited about having a January meeting, since not everybody's saying yes, let's have one, but not everybody's saying no, let's not either. We
I'm
did
saying
have,
let's go for it.
all right.
I say go for it.
I
Chair,
just say send me an email and tell me if I'm coming or not going.
Chair, it sounds like with the outpouring of enthusiasm and the understanding that we're all going to be sober when we appear, I think we should do it. But
I will be around. I am happy to do that. I don't think we need a motion or a vote, even though I did say that originally. If it was more contentious, I would like to have a vote, but I don't think that it is. There are always 1, 2, or 3 people who do not attend a TAAC meeting. That's just the nature of things. So if that's the case in January, I am fine with that. And again, if you just let us know beforehand, it will be an excuse absence.
But to your point, Chair, we do have to have a quorum to conduct official business. So that is why we spent as much time on this particular topic as we have, because we don't want to waste Allison's time or any staff time to come on and then we can't conduct normal business.
Why don't we vote?
So we will be having a January meeting, and we will be
Well,
sending out an email. It might be more than 1 week in advance this time, because I think the week in advance will probably fall around around the first of the year. But
So are
business
we
is,
voting or not? Because I heard let's vote.
I don't think it's necessary. I only wanted to do a vote to get an official call if there was more if we were more closely divided in terms of whether or not we should have a January meeting. But it seems like short of just a couple people not being in town, there's no real desire even by them to not have a January meeting. I haven't heard anybody say we should not have a January meeting. I've just heard people say that, oh, I just won't be able to come, which is fine.
Well, I can say, Chair, we should not have a January meeting if that helps. I mean, I'm just trying.
What are you doing to me, Darrell?
I'm just trying to move the conversation one way or the other. I'm not sure which way I'm supposed to be moving it, but let's get it moved here so we can get on to.
We're having a January meeting. I'm making an executive decision here, and we're not going to vote on it.
okay, and I will send the meeting invitation and all the information on the 29th of December.
Thank you
That's
very
Wednesday.
much, Allison.
Thank you so much, Allison.
All right, so let's move on to TAAC Anniversaries. So TAAC was founded by the Minnesota State Legislature in 1992. That was 30 years ago next year. 30 years is a long time. We've gotten a lot done. We've been a strong voice for folks with disabilities at the Metropolitan Council. Should we have some sort of a retrospective? Should we do have interviews or photos or some sort of celebration. I'm really just tossing this out there as an open discussion to TAAC members as to should we do nothing at all? You know, do we not? Does
I
it?
think we should do something because then we're being recognized at the same time for all our work. Because I don't want other parts to get recognized so much that that's all they know about. But if we get recognized, like maybe we do an article or do something, the public will know we're here and we're doing some great work. And I was 22 when it started, so, and I was riding the bus before that. But it's besides the point. The point is that the community knows that we're here, and maybe we'll bring some more disability people, into the community of wanting to take Metro Mobility and the city bus and help us make a new wave of the future. That's
Thank you,
just
Heidi.
what I think.
Thank you, Heidi. Is there anybody that does not feel like we should recognize the 30th anniversary of TAAC?
Allie, can you please come down here?
I heard something. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I heard a little something.
Yeah, I heard it too.
Might have been unintentional. It sounded kind of like background.
I believe it was.
Okay, so I'm again taking your silence as support.
And just to this point, I think this is a fabulous opportunity for the TAAC members to showcase the 3 decades of work that we have done. And I think it's an opportunity that we can create a timeline that would be a visual timeline that would propel us into getting some real concrete recognition and some longevity for the fact that TAAC has been around for 30 years. I got appointed to TAAC during the Ventura administration in 2000. So I have been serving TAAC in a official capacity for almost 2 decades. So thank you for that opportunity, and I look forward to building another decade or so.
That almost sounded like you were volunteering to lead a work group to plan whatever celebration we do.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that, Chair. And I see some enthusiastic members on this call with me, and I would love to work with them to do that.
Cool.
David, do we have any information from the very beginning of TAAC?
That is, I think, what we will.
I know they do have it for Metro Mobility.
Hold on, Heidi. Please wait. Please wait for people to finish talking.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. No, I was talking to Heidi, not you, Darrell. But I think you were chiming in for the same reason. Heidi, I'll come to you in just one second. But yes, Claudia, I think that will be one of the major things that this work group does. Is they do. It almost might even be kind of like a historical sort of research project as to how TAAC started, what they did originally, Darrell's timeline. But we can dig into the details of what exactly a celebration or recognition could look like. But I would love to take suggestions right now, and Claudia, I will write that down. The history of TAAC.
I would love to see the TV stations in this one.
I will bring the cake or figure out a cake. So we'll tell the Met Council they don't have to worry about the cake. But
that's scary.
The TAAC cake.
The
Okay.
TAAC cake, yes.
I will go to Heidi and then I will go to Carrie. So go ahead, Heidi.
What I was going to say is when I was at the legislators, when they were talking about Metro Mobility, they had a really good timeline up on the screen so people can understand why we're asking for funding or why they want to change certain policies. So I don't see why we can't tap into the past, because I know one of the things I found was an old Metro Mobility guidebook, that had a picture saying, the bus, and one of our old people that he passed away that used to be on our committee. And then inside would be like, all the areas where you can use Metro Mobility and so there's a long history, you know, because I just happened to keep one of those old books and didn't realize there's a rich history compared to where we are now. Now it's all pretty much digital, you know, so it's something to think about when we put this together.
Fantastic, Heidi. Carrie.
Thanks, David. A couple of things. Darrell, I would be willing to help do a planning. And the second thing is, I have an idea. We could maybe do a public access show with disability viewpoints.
Absolutely, absolutely, Carrie. There's a number of opportunities that we, as the committee that we formed together, we could figure out how to publicize it and how to get it out there and get some attention around it. So, as a committee, a subcommittee, if we choose to form one, we would be able to go through all those ideas, whether we want to do them or not. So, I mean, but you're right.
Yeah. Well, I'm offering my assistance.
Thank you.
And I'd be willing to help too, because I think Access Press would love to jump on this, you know, and put it in their newspaper.
I'm Jasmine.
Yes, Sam, go ahead.
I'm going to have to leave, but I did want to let everyone know and remind you that I do have a radio show on disability topics, and this probably falls into it.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great idea because then we'll hit a wider variety of people.
Yep.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, Sam. Thank you for
Bye,
joining
Sam.
us.
Bye, Sam. Happy holidays.
You too.
Happy holidays, Sam.
Yep.
All right. Well, since we're here, and we already have 3 people who are excited to serve on this work group, subcommittee, task force, celebration, planning, whatever we want to call it. John, go ahead. You are muted, sir. But you are still muted, John. We cannot hear anything you're saying.
I joined, and I think I'm also a board member of Access Press and can look into that. And I do think that the history aspect has some real value to put together at this point.
Thank you. I have John, Heidi, Carrie, and Darrell. Would anybody else? And you can let me know via email or phone call or text anytime in the next month or so if you want to be on this.
And then we're doing this over Zoom?
Yeah, it'll be online. We haven't yet discussed meeting in person yet, and I'm guessing that discussion is going to be delayed even more now that we
because of the new variants and certain things. I understand. I'd rather be safe than sorry, but I was just asking over Zoom, and then you'll send out an email to just give us the updates and when to come.
Yep, I'll help organize when the meetings take place.
Okay, cool, awesome, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Is there anybody else right now who would like to be on the work group, the celebration planning work group? I'll send an email out because I know some folks are not here.
Well, I'm pretty persuasive at times, so I would expect anybody that is on the committee and wants to make sure that TAAC stays around another 30 years, figure out a part or a place where they want to be in the celebration so that we can include everybody that wants to be a part of this.
Who's on it right now? Darrell,
Darrell, Carrie, Heidi, and John.
Okay.
Carrie.
I'll send an email out to the entire group to asking for more folks and for ideas as well.
Yeah, I think Patty said she was on too. So.
Was that a?
I don't know what that was, but it's like okay.
I
You're
like
doing
the
a thumbs up.
excitement without the follow through, Patty. It's great. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I will also, this is Patsy, I will
Okay.
also be on that.
Yeah, that's
What
what
about you,
sorry,
Claudia?
Patsy.
I'd be happy to be on it. This is Richard.
See now by this time, David, we're gonna have the whole committee on that subcommittee. So we're gonna have to have a separate meeting for just the planning of this. So
I think this is gonna be fun though.
I'm excited.
I think
It's
we're gonna
fun.
learn. I think we're gonna learn a lot about ourselves and our history here. That we didn't know about. I'm excited to see what comes out of this. I also have Guthrie, uh, who in the chat has expressed support and also willingness to participate. I do have to give credit where credit is due. He did bring this to my attention. This was not my idea. He did email me a few months back. So Guthrie is the person who brought this up. So I do not deserve credit for this idea.
Well,
Thank you,
David, for acknowledging that, and thank you, Guthrie, for being my past employer and the one that is always looking out for opportunities for us to shine and be the leaders that we are. So thank you, Guthrie.
So Guthrie could be the one who could go into some of the archive stuff, or because he might have access to it.
Yeah, we can work out details maybe at
Well, I was just thinking
first
because
gathering.
I know we're going to think about that, but I was just thinking having him on it because he works with, in that office building, so maybe he could help us figure out how to get some of that, where we're not allowed to, but he can access it for us and then he can share it with us. That would be nice to have,
It's a great suggestion. Cool. So I think that covers that. We're doing pretty good on time. I'd like to move on to the second added agenda item, which would be some sort of driver recognition, which to my understanding used to exist but doesn't anymore. But I do know that this idea was actually Darrell's, so I'm going to pass it to him and not take credit for this and give credit to him for this idea.
Yeah, I'll give you credit for this when and if we do this and we do it on a consistent basis. I have looked at the notes as much as I could under the Met Council, and I have found out that driver recognition and driver retention, when I typed it into their search engines, only came up about three times. So very, very small numbers, right? One of those times was mentioned by our committee, particularly by TAAC. I did not look into the notes or into the minutes as to what that particular looked like, but I do remember when I got involved in tech in the very beginning, let's say 2000, 2002 to 2006 rather, periodically we would recognize drivers for their for going out of their way kind of thing, those kind of small things that drivers typically would do that are outside of their job scope or things like that. Or if they had good job performance or on time performance, they got recognized for that. Those recognitions typically were done with only the paratransit side and the metro mobility side to boost some driver retention and driver morale kind of thing. What I would hope is that we would take that driver retention or that driver recognition maybe on a quarterly basis or maybe twice a year, and we would highlight particular drivers or particular services that fall into our transit system, and we would say these people deserve recognition, whether they get a certificate, whether they have a cup of punch or a piece of cake. I believe when we do that, numbers show that we retain those drivers and those individuals for a longer period of time. So I think given that opportunity, I think TAAC could play a role in that, just like they did in the past. But I think it would be, I think it would be good for all of us involved to do some driver recognition.
So Darrell, are you thinking that it comes strictly from TAAC and the disability community in terms of driver recognition, or are you
Yes.
talking about in general?
No, we could partner. TAC could be the umbrella source of creating the recognition, but then we could partner with other organizations in the community that might want to sponsor that, or might want to come support the recognition of these drivers. But I guess uniquely it would be different from what we've done in the past, where we've only focused on the opt-outs or the paratransit service, but it would include the mainline service, as well as the light rail, and maybe even MTV if we want to get creative.
Any other TAAC members have thoughts on this? I'd be willing to hear from Met Council, Metro Transit staff too. Not putting you on the spot, but if you want to chime in, by all means.
Right, because if it's not doable or viable, if it would take up a lot of work to do, then obviously we can't do it during times of COVID and during the times like this. But I do think it would be a worthwhile opportunity for staff and the drivers on their streets to get some real recognition from people that they're serving.
Personally, I really like this idea. When we tend to talk about drivers, it always tends to be what they did wrong. I think that what they do right is far, far, far outnumbers what they do wrong. But I would say it's an unfortunate part of human nature to kind of really let the negative outweigh the positive, and this would be a way to counteract that. And if it does boost morale, if it does, like you said, Darrell, potentially contribute to driver retention, and I think even most importantly, if it does help build the relationship between riders with disabilities and the drivers, I think that, I mean, I don't see a downside to this, short of just making it happen logistically with staff.
Right, that last point of yours is where I think TAAC would play a huge role, and it would give them some sense of, it would give the public some sense of credibility to what TAAC has been saying this whole time.
David, this is Doug.
Yes.
Yeah, so from our perspective, I mean, we do a celebration twice a year for our drivers, and on that time we've had like Focus Beyond, a transition school. They would come to the garage and recognize them, and I know the drivers super appreciate that. But yeah, I think this is also a great idea. It's just the logistics of, getting the drivers to wherever we're gonna do that.
Right.
Is it Zoom or is it in person or whatever? But that could be doable.
Thank you, Doug.
And how do we spread this out so it's not just one-sided, like, because
Right.
the Twin Cities is pretty big, and then you got the suburbs that do it too, and then you got the Saturdays and Sunday people, and so how do we spread this out so the playing field is really awesome and people like this idea and they want to be a part of this, and they but I don't want it to be where they know they're going to be recognized so they can move up the ladder. I want it to be like they really got recognized for their good work, so it's something to think about.
Go ahead, Darrell. I have thoughts on this too, but go ahead, Darrell.
Chair, to Doug's point and to Heidi's point, I think logistically we'd have to look at this and see how we can make this work, because I would also want to include, I heard Doug's point very clearly. You do 2 driver recognitions twice a year or once a year, right? 2 of them. And each time the driver recognition event happens, the nighttime staff or the overnight staff or the third shift doesn't get their pizza, and they don't get the recognition and the pats on the backs and the smiles that the morning crew got or that the afternoon crew got. So you're right, to the point of logistics, it would be kind of challenging, but I would be willing to go into any garage during driver recognition and give them a couple certificates if they so deserved it. So it doesn't have to be, at a centralized location. It would be easier if it was, because we could all show up. But if it has to be at different garages or different points of time, we can do that.
I like that, Darrell, and Heidi, your point is spot on. I mean, I would view this, building off of Darrell's original point, I would view this as really bubbling up from the disability community and then coming through TAAC. So we would ask our community, give us examples of drivers who have gone above and beyond or who have done whatever, and then TAAC could then decide,
We could rate them or whatever.
Yeah.
We could figure it out. We'll figure out a system how to pare it down or pair them up, whatever we needed to do, but we could figure it out. But
Yeah.
You're right. It should come from the community first, and then it could bubble into us. And
And then we could address Heidi's point to where we're not just only doing Metromobility drivers. We're doing a conductor, we're doing a Metromobility driver, we're doing a third shift person, we're doing a suburb person, we're doing, we get folks, and we could do more than one every 6 months. It could be three individuals who stood out in our community. And then we can tie that into what Doug was talking about, the twice a year one, where maybe 1 or 2 of us or a few of us go to the driver recognition thing and we give them, the $1,000 gift card to Target because Met Council totally has that kind of money, right?
Right, there we go. If they're not spending it before New Year's, right?
That was a joke. I want that to be on the record. I did not commit the Met Council to providing any monetary compensation to its drivers for recognition from TAAC.
I heard that.
Cool. Well, I think this is a great idea. I think this is something that we should move forward on. Do y'all think yes.
I think that we also need to pay attention to or give recognition to the reservationists.
You're exactly right, Carrie. We forgot them. Maybe we can include them at some point in the driver recognition program at some point, and maybe Doug can elaborate and say that they are included at some point.
Yeah, because I was thinking, we can maybe have 2 separate ones, because there's a lot of drivers, and like you said, like you've been saying, we have first, second, and third shift recognition, but we only have 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. recognition for all the reservationists.
That's a fantastic idea, Carrie. And I think that's something that is unique to our community too, because of Metromobility, where you have to book rides. I would say that we shouldn't do driver recognition without having at least one reservation recognition at the same time, because they do play a vital role in getting us around.
Yes, and also
before we do the recognition thing, what is the qualifications in order to earn this award. You know what I mean? Like when I won self-advocacy awards, I had to do certain things to order in my disability community to be honored. That's how they voted me and said, Haiti deserves this award. And then I went to Texas to get the ARC award. It's just an example, you know. So what is the qualifications, you
Heidi,
know, to fall under it?
Heidi, that would be for the the group to figure out. That would be for our committee or subcommittee to
Well, I
figure
wanted
out.
to bring it up just so we got a clear understanding, you know, so, you know, because not all reservations and not all drivers are up to what we talk about trying to clean up. At the same time, there are some really good people out there that are doing fantastic work.
Those
I'm
are the
just
ones I
looking at
want to
both
capture.
sides.
Those are the ones I want to capture. I want to capture the ones that are already doing the good work so they can teach the ones that aren't doing the good work. Hey, if you do the good work like I do, you get recognition by TAAC.
That's a fantastic idea, Heidi, and Darrell, you were spot on. Those are the details that we work out offline. I would view this as
Well,
not a
if
work
we at
group.
least talk about that now, then we'll know what we're heading ourselves
I
into,
know.
kind of like, oh, we just have to at least have A, B, and C, and then we put a committee together and go from there.
So
'Cause I don't want to commit myself to something that I don't understand what we're committing to.
So the details of the criteria, we do not have the time to discuss right now. That is a more kind of in the weeds discussion that I think a smaller group of us should have with. I would like to have a staff member there too as well, because they're there every day with these operations and with these drivers. But yes, Heidi, it's a good point. I would view this as an ongoing work group that meets every few months, or even a subcommittee that meets every few months, a driver recognition subcommittee that meets every few months to really determine what drivers and what reservationists would fit into this. But initially, I think coming up with the criteria is very important, Heidi. That and that will take some work. Do I have interest from folks? I don't think this would be tons of work. Maybe initially, as we sort of set up how this process unfolds, it will take some work. But after that, it would just be a matter of gathering stories from the community and then deciding what drivers to recognize. I'm happy to serve on this.
That's nice, Chair, because I was going to withdraw my police involvement committee to serve on this, but if you can do it, then we can just chat about it and we can work through it. So
yeah, and I'll send a note out to everybody too regarding this as well. So I'll get the ball rolling on this. I think it's something that's important to help build relationships between drivers, reservationists, and the Met Council and the disability community too. All right.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for our partnering organizations, more importantly, like CCD and AARP and those groups. I think this is a good opportunity for them to give us some of their feedback and recognize some people that we typically have not cared about recognizing in the past. So I think you got your work cut out for you, and I'm happy that you're doing it, David, and I'll be there with you. So thank you.
All right. So moving on to subcommittee reports. Ken Rodgers did send us an email update on the blue line. If you'd like to expand on that, Ken, you can. If not, that is all right as well. If you are still here, you might not be here anymore. Well, I'm kind of glad we didn't have to vote later on because it looks like we've lost quorum.
I did see his email, just so you know that it is coming in. It was sent out by Alice.
No, we have quorum still. Okay, cool. So Ken's not here. Chris Bates, are you on the line? I don't think you are, but I don't want to.
He called in. he's not gonna, he wasn't here.
Okay. All right. So Chris, Gold and Rushline. Darrell, did you have any updates for us for Gold and Rushline?
I don't. Currently, I don't have any updates for Gold Line or and I believe Rushline will I'll be serving in a different capacity with them after the first of the year, so I'll keep you updated if that works. But yeah, I don't have no real updates at this time. I could be wrong. If I find some, I'll forward them to you and try to get them in our packet.
Thank you, Darrell. So in terms of bus priority seating TAAC work group, I do know that the video is at least in its rough cut done. I don't know if it's had all of the accessibility features added to it. That's why I hesitate to show it or send it out to everybody just yet. But they do have a near finished product. I'm willing to let anybody else add on to that if they want. It's not a requirement, but I do know that that work group is doing a good job.
Yeah, I did see the video. Thank you, Doug, for sending it to me again. I've shared it with a few other folks privately, and it's really well done. Thank you.
In terms of chair's report, I do not have anything. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment at this time?
Dave, I can with regard to Sam's question earlier.
Oh,
I know Sam's
yes.
gone, but I shot Sam an email to this effect in case anyone else was wondering the same thing.
Okay.
When Metro Mobility makes any cuts related to fixed route retractions, that will not impact our overall service area footprint. That would impact what falls into ADA service versus non-ADA service. So her question was, would any future cuts potentially remove my access to service since I'm already non-ADA? And the answer right now is no, that, our overall service area is defined by state statute.
Right.
And that won't change. So, what will change with fixed route is what qualifies as ADA service versus non-ADA service, not which areas we serve overall.
Are they basing it on the pandemic, do you know, or is it just because they really aren't getting riders anymore?
Chair, members of the committee, the temporary changes that were enacted due to pandemic ridership levels, Metro Mobility ignored. So when we make changes based on fixed route, we only do what looks like it is a long-term decision as a retraction. And we also ignore, every year Metro Transit contracts in response to summer hours with school closures, for example. And we don't, because we know that's just an every year natural contraction that then gets re-expanded the following season. So, when we retract, we only do so in what looks like it's going to be a long-term service adjustment by Metro Transit.
Thank you, Andy, for addressing that. Are there any other public comments? Okay, I don't see anyone. We will move into member comment now. Are there TAAC members who would like to make a comment at this point in time?
I did have one, but I forgot what it was, so I was hoping somebody else would say their member comment, and then I would circle back to mine. Oh, I know what it is now if I get called on. So
take it away, Darrell.
All right, under member comment, I would like to address something, and Heidi's point where she said ridership was down. Maybe she was clear specifying Metro Mobility, because I just became aware, not recently, I've been aware for a little while, that ridership is up on our buses since October, 18%, and it's up on our train. It is even up higher on our trains. I could have those numbers mixed up, but the numbers I looked at is one was 18% and one was 38%. So what that tells me that we are slowly regaining some revenue, and we are slowly regaining ridership. I hope that really continues to happen, and I hope it includes new ridership that will be sustaining and overall help the system for a long period of time. I don't know. I haven't dug too deep into it, but I did see the news report on Channel 5 about a couple weeks ago or so. So I did want to tell you the ridership is up slowly, but it's going up. So let's keep riding the bus, keep riding the trains, whatever we can do. Let's do it.
We have 2 minutes. Any other member comment? I see a hand, Carrie. I don't know if that was a holdover from before. I just want to make sure to recognize you if you would like
No,
to.
this is new. I'm not sure if I should share this with the whole group or just Christine, but last month I remember hearing that we have an app that we can download or something to make our rides, or how's that working? I misunderstood the last month, I think.
Yes, there is an app that I think was rolled out a number of months ago. I don't think that's for booking Metro Mobility rides, but I could be wrong. But we can take it offline and get your answer. Is that your question? Does David book? Okay.
Yeah, if it needs to be offline, that's fine.
Chair, members of the committee, that's another 10-second answer if you'd like.
We got about 90 seconds, so take it away.
That app, Carrie, is for booking the premium on demand rides through airport taxi. So if you ever use the subsidized taxi service, you can set up and book rides online with the taxi company.
So there is nothing yet for setting up rides for Metro Mobility.
No, you can book rides online, but that's not new. That's been in place for some time. So the newer addition is the airport taxi app, but I can absolutely get you set up for online trip booking.
Yeah,
if you want to
I'd
just
like
get
that.
set up for Metro. Yeah, I'll get you set up and email you your temporary password.
Great, thank you.
I have a quick question, and this is a member comment because of what Carrie said. Is there ever going to be, I know we got the phone calls and we get emails, is there ever going to be a text sent to the phone where you can get a text knowing you're coming? Instead of it going to your phone, as like a voicemail? Some people like text. I was just wondering if Andy could answer that question, if they're ever going to build something like that.
Go ahead, Darrell.
Heidi, that already does happen. Some of us can opt for a text message. Some of us opt for a phone message. I do have friends and family members that do the text option. So that already does happen.
It does exist? Okay, so where do you go? Do you go on the website to get it?
I would have to take it with you offline with you, and we would figure.
No, I was just wondering. Because
Together.
most people know the phone call one.
Right. Like I do the phone call one, but I have other members of my family that only do texting. So they get their text, they get their 10-minute warning through a text.
That's good. And if the pandemic comes back, I want to stick with the rules, staying safe with everybody. That's transit and also with Metro Mobility. So that's just my comments for the future, because I don't know what's happening in the future right now as we speak.
Thank you very much, Heidi, and we'll make sure to get that figured out on how to get your text.
Yeah, that would be cool. And then that would be awesome if we could teach more people in the future too about all these different options, because I hear this all the time in the community. You mean you can? It's like, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. So that would be awesome. All right, thanks.
All right, everybody, we are at 2:32. Thank you very much for a fantastic December meeting, and we will see you next year in January, on January 5th. Have a great
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays.
Thank you.